There's a new gas tax hike on the way. That's what General Motors CEO Dan Akerson wants, a $1 per gallon increase that he says will push drivers towards more fuel-efficient cars. So, the company already bailed out by Washington wants the same administration that bailed it out to make gas unaffordable so people will finally buy a Chevy Volt. Joining me now to take apart this nonsense is Cato Institute senior fellow Dan Mitchell. I mean, Dan, welcome here, of course. I'm so aggravated by this. I almost neglected to welcome you to the show. I mean, the idea of any kind of a tax increase, I would think, would be dead on arrival in the House of Representatives. But the chutzpah of the head of Government Motors, which is owned by the government, suggesting that a $1 a gallon gas tax imposed by the federal government would help his business sell these new cars is crazy.
It's a perfect example of why crony capitalism is inherently corrupt. Whatever this guy really thinks, maybe he's dumb enough to think this is a good idea, but even if he didn't think it was a good idea, he knows he has to please the political masters on Capitol Hill and in the White House. And whenever big government and big business, and for that matter, big labor get in bed together, you better believe that taxpayers and consumers are both going to you-know-what in a very unpleasant way.
Are we in danger, Dan, of a culture developing in our society where requests like this, which would have been laughed at a few years ago, will be taken seriously? Because the government, and both parties have done this, I mean, the bailouts of GM started under President Bush. The government does pick industries that it wants to bail out, and labor unions that it wants to help, and bankruptcy rules that it wants to change, and investors that it doesn't care if they get their money back, and favors its friends and harms its enemies, and props up industries like this. So if the government really owns this industry, should the government make this industry look like it's working better?
This is why the rule of law is so important. That sounds like a very meaningless concept, but take a look at Argentina. 50, 60 years ago, Argentina was one of the 10 richest countries in the world. But now they're way down at the bottom of the pack because they went down this path of Peronism, of crony capitalism, of government and big business and the labor unions deciding that they were going to, in effect, create an economic cartel for their country, and it ruined Argentina. And I'm terrified, I'm worried, and it's, again, not just partisan, because as you pointed out, some of this happened under Bush. We are going to destroy what made America so exceptional and so special by creating this environment where everyone thinks that the way you earn money is by being connected in Washington rather than providing things that consumers value.
Well, does the government have an interest in General Motors selling Chevy Volts? Because the government still owns, I think it's about 60% of General Motors. Therefore, would it be so surprising if the government does something to incentivize us to buy these cars that don't compete on the free market? They might 10 years from now, but they don't today.
There's no question the government will probably try to tilt the playing field in a way that would benefit GM and Chrysler over Ford. But I actually think that's secondary to the bigger problem of our economy being corrupted by this need, this perceived need of the business community to get in bed with the politicians in Washington. Nothing good can come out of that unless we somehow think lower living standards and political corruption are valuable attributes.
We only have about a half a minute left. Zeroing in on this issue of the gas tax, wouldn't the price of gas go down if the administration permitted more offshore drilling, even if it takes years for the oil to be refined into gasoline and make its way to our gas stations? If the administration just says, yes, it'll be cheaper tomorrow, wouldn't it?
I remember 15 years ago, during the Clinton years, when Congress tried to open up more drilling in Alaska and offshore, and all the people on the left and the big government people said, oh, don't do that. It wouldn't have any benefit for another 10 years. Well, that would have been 5 years ago. By all means, let's deal with the supply and the demand, and government's messing up both.
Thank you. Thanks very much.